But without further, let's go into day 5 and see what's in store. So day 5 saw is still the plaintiff's case. In this case, it is still the case in chief of Nikita's hand. So Nikita Hand, who called and her legal team called up Neil Dempsey, a paramedic and a firefighter within the Dublin Fire Brigade. And this is what he had to say. So Mr. Dempsey noticed visible marks in or around Miss Hand's throat. At 8:41 a.m. on December 10th, Mr. Dempsey was mobilized to answer a call, he confirms. We went up to a domestic house dwelling in Drimnagh, he says. He said he met a lady upstairs, which was quite distressed and afraid. He noticed physical marks on her, saying there was some physical marks in or around her throat. That woman was Nikita Hand. Mr. Dempsey says she stated that she was sexually assaulted. Her chief concern was she had a tampon that was up inside her. Mr. Dempsey's female colleague, I'm gonna butcher most of these pronunciations. I do apologize in advance. Yeah. So Mr. Dempsey says Mr. Dempsey's female colleague Aifne came in and had a chat with Nikita. Gadai came into the room and he stepped out. She had mentioned a hotel. She had said something like the Penthouse Hotel, and I didn't know where that was at that stage, Mr. Dempsey said. If someone presents of an assault of that nature, we take them to the sexual assault treatment unit, which is SATU in this case. He confirms and says they brought Nikita to the ambulance. Her vital signs were checked and her heart rate was elevated. Her demeanor, Mr. Dempsey says, was quite distressed, and if memory serves him, Miss Hand and had some form of a panic attack on way to the Rotunda Hospital. They arrived at the hospital at 9:20 a.m. CCTV footage from inside the ambulance is now being played in court. Court showing CCTV footage of Miss Hand from inside the ambulance. Miss Hand and the witness, Mr. Dempsey, are seen on CCTV entering the ambulance. Miss Hand is seen lying down on a bed inside. Mr. Dempsey, female colleague, has also entered by this stage and is seen speaking to Miss Hand. She is seen taking her coat off. Mr. Dempsey's female colleague is seen examining Miss Hand's leg. Counsel says you can see some bruising there. A guarder is seen in the ambulance having entered through a side door, the court hears. Miss Hand's mother, Debbie, is seen on CCTV entering the ambulance. At 49 minutes, the ambulance leaves. Miss Hand became a bit more distressed on the way to the hospital, and she wanted to sit up. Mr. Dempsey says, stating she appeared to be having a panic attack. Miss Hand is seen being given a sick bag. Mr. Dempsey says she appeared as though she was going to vomit, and that her chief worry was a tampon and the pains she was having in that area. Ma'am, please don't say. Miss Hand didn't want to go into the hospital in a trolley. She went in a hospital wheelchair, Mr. Dempsey says. Remy Farrell. So right now it's a cross-examination of Mr. Dempsey. So he goes on to say, because Remy Farrell is a counsel for Conor McGregor, asked Mr. Dempsey if he made a statement to Gadai 4 days afterwards, and he confirms that he did. Reading the statement, Mr. Farrell says Mr. Dempsey did. Mr. Dempsey said she could hardly remember, but she was raped. Mr. Farrell asked if Miss Hand had also said, "Ma'am, please don't say." Mr. Dempsey says he thinks that's right. Judge Owens asked Mr. Dempsey if there were signs of intoxication at that stage. Mr. Dempsey says no, and that Miss Han appeared more upset than anything. And that was it from Mr. Dempsey. He left the witness stand. The next witness is Ifne Scully, a colleague of Mr. Dempsey's and an advanced paramedic within the Dublin Fire Brigade. This is the one that was asking how she was doing. So in which came out during Mr. Dempsey's direct exam. So in Miss Ifne, I can't pronounce her name. I do apologize. In Mr. Ifne's direct exam, she says that she was very bruised. I haven't actually seen somebody so bruised. Miss Scully says there appears to be some bruising on Miss Han's lower neck. She says Miss Han was wearing pajamas. When Miss Scully examined her, Miss Han had bruising around her chest, around her breast down to legs. Miss Scully said that Miss Han was very bruised and that she hadn't actually seen somebody so bruised in her time. Miss Scully asked for permission to check Miss Han's injuries and she allowed her. She says Miss Scully tried to establish what had happened. Miss Scully says she basically told me that she had grabbed I'll start again. Sorry about that. Miss Scully says she basically told me she had been grabbed around the neck, and she said about fighting somebody off, and there was threats made to her. Miss Han did not name her attacker. Miss Scully says the conversation took place in the ambulance during her examination of Miss Han and before Gadai came in. Miss Scully confirms. Miss Scully says also her demeanor was she was curled up. She came out of the ambulance like in that curled up position, very distressed, going into the hospital in wheelchair. She just wanted to be under the blanket, really. Dr. Emma Quinn takes a stand. The next witness is Dr. Emma Quinn, a GP in Walkinston Medical Center. Ms. Quinn confirms Ms. Han is a long-standing patient of the practice and attended on December 19th at 3:20 p.m. Ms. Quinn says she came to me because she told me her story that she had been assaulted and that she was complaining of pain in her neck and also had sensation of a lump in her neck. She was distressed the whole time. I felt there was tenderness on the left side of the neck, which was consistent with internal bruising and consistent with the story she had told me of being held forcibly on the left side of her neck. At the time, I diagnosed internal bruising, which would be something it would take a lot to resolve than external bruising. It would be there for a few weeks. On cross-examination, Remy Farrell, senior counsel for Conor McGregor, asked Miss Quinn if Miss Han attended her a number of times before the incident in the year of 2018. Dr. Quinn says she would need to look at her records. Referring to her notes, Dr. Quinn says Ms. Han attended her GP practice on April 3rd, 2017 and May 8th, 2018. Mr. Farrell, dealing with May 8th, asked if it was in respect of an issue with neck or back pain from a road traffic accident. Dr. Quinn says yes. Dr. Quinn says she did a referral for an MRI on that day. Mr. Farrell, reading her letter of referral, says the doctor noted as of that date that Ms. Han was complaining of neck pain. He says there's an entry from another doctor on June 8th. Increased anxiety with panic attack for a few weeks, he added, and that 7 Xanax were given to Ms. Han. So from that cross-examination, what I'm gathering is they're trying to, the defense in this case is trying to actually say that the back pain that she has experienced may not have been from this incident and may have been from a long-standing back pain that was already occurring. So that's what they're trying to paint here, which I don't know how that's gonna go down with the jury, because again, she, like Conor, without hearing from Conor, he's not really denying that she was in a compromising position when she was being, especially with her saying that Conor McGregor told her, and that's how I feel when I was in the octagon. That's a very specific statement to be made of someone that has been grappled or been held, as you will see, being held with the UFC fighter. So that could have caused more trouble if she had an history of back pain already. So I don't know how that will come across to the jury, is what I'm trying to say. Dr. Frank Clark takes the stand. The next witness is Dr. Frank Clark. Dr. Clark has a long history with Miss Hand. He confirms and says he knew her from when she was a child. Over the years, he has met with Miss Hand and her mother to see if she had any problems. Dr. Clark says Miss Hand had a history of being an anxious person. Dr. Clark says he was probably the doctor who mainly treated Miss Hand. She didn't attend very often when she was very young, he says. She had a history over many years of being an anxious person and was struggling at times to manage her life, Dr. Clark says. Because of her personality, she tended to be anxious, withdrawn. Dr. Clark confirms Miss Han was administered serotonin, which he says is extremely commonly prescribed medication, quote unquote. Dr. Clark says that Miss Han and her mother were struggling to cope, quote unquote, 3 months after the alleged incident. Elaborating on serotonin, Dr. Clark says that the potential side effects in the short term, in the space of a couple of weeks, are increased anxiety and that it upsets your tummy. Dr. Clark says that that passes and most people would settle down. Hold on, I lost my page. Okay, there we are. Saying that people take it once a day, Dr. Clark adds, is not a sedative, not a tranquilizer. It is fixing an imbalance in your neurochemistry. You can't abuse it. Referring to his report from November 9th, 2020, Dr. Clark provided notes of various attendances since March 2019. The report, he says, is a brief account of where we were in November 2020, of her general health and psychological state. Dr. Clark says that in March 2019, Miss Hand and her mother were trying to support one another and they were struggling to cope. Saying she had been unfit for work, Dr. Clark added she was working as a hairdresser, a hair color person. In the course of her work is a kind of performance-orientated thing, dealing with people all the time, and she wasn't really coping with that. Very conscious of social media, scared of being identified. She was very depressed and anxious and unfit to do that kind of work. She was getting counseling as well, which was the most important thing. So, moving on, doctor describes effect of medication on Miss Anne. Quote, a type of derealization where you feel emotionally numb as though you're living a parallel life, unquote. We tried to step up the doses, Dr. Clark adds. We increased it up in steps of 50 milligrams, but she went upwards of 150. But unfortunately, she had problems tolerating that. The medication at times doesn't suit people. Unfortunately, Nikita had that problem. A lot of gastrointestinal upset. She also had another effect from the medication, a type of derealization where you feel emotionally numb as though you're living a parallel life. Dr. Clark says it's a very uncomfortable situation to be in and that Miss Anne was taken off the medication. Dr. Clark says that Miss Han was placed on another medication that she has found helpful, a drug that would not be prescribed routinely. Dr. Clark says that it helps with sleep and has a sedative effect. This is for someone having night terrors, panic, and much more severe distress he had. And Dr. Clark, Miss Han's current partner, has been very positive thing for her. I wonder if she broke up with the other partner, or if she's still with the same partner today, because the word current partner is maybe suggestive of a breakup at some point. But anyway, we continue on. Goes on to say, Dr. Clark says that Miss Hand was given diazepam and Valium, a class of benzodiazepine drugs. Dr. Clark says they try to avoid them as an ongoing prescription, as they can be abused over time. Yes, they're very addictive. In November 2020, Dr. Clark says he concluded Miss Han has in difficult physical and emotional distress and would require ongoing counseling. As of April 3rd this year, Dr. Clark says Miss Han was continuing her regular psychotherapy for PTSD. Miss Han was taken off the benzo-type drug since January and not on it since. He says Miss Han was left on one form of medication for sleep, a mild medication, Dr. Clark adds. He says Miss Han remains determined to stay in psychotherapy. Dr. Clark says Miss Han has struggled over the years because of the PTSD with her self-esteem and classic symptoms when people lose hope, hate themselves, start drinking too much, sometimes behaving in an uncharacteristic way. That happened to Nikita. She brought that back under control with the help of her partner, he says. PTSD, Dr. Clark says, is a condition caused by an extreme, stressful, or terrifying event. Symptoms include flashbacks, nightmares, people getting triggered by things they don't expect. They have a very hard time coping. Dr. Clark says people who suffer with PTSD can get intrusive memories and upsetting dreams at night. People with a lot of psychological distress can have a lot of gut symptoms. He says you can have episodes of avoidance. Another reason Nikita couldn't work, she would go into work and remember that this type of event happened at a Christmas party because of work. You get these negative thoughts in your mood: fear, blame, anger, guilt, and Nikita had them all. Not being able to remember clearly what happened is another symptom. Nikita's relationship with her partner at the time failed, and she had difficulty supporting her mother. So it comes out that she's not, she's no longer in that relationship with the guy that we're covering in days 1 to 4. Miss Han's current partner, Dr. Clark, says he's been a very positive thing for her. She has been able to get more stable state in terms of lifestyle and has been making very good progress along those lines. Nikita isn't an alcoholic. She would have had episodes she would go out. Alcohol decreases anxiety, Dr. Clark says. It can make you impulsive, but the thing people don't realize is it causes more depression. What can happen is your level of depression increases. Alcohol is very dangerous for when people are depressed.